Dobrodošli na dogodku Mesta in krožno gospodarstvo, od urbanih primerov in politik do novih priložnosti sodelovanja. Dogodek organiziramo Ministrstvo za okolje in prostor, ki ga tudi financira, Inštitut za politike prostora in Skupnost občin Slovenije. Moje ime je Marko Petrdin, Prihranski inštitut za politike prostora in bom današnji dogodek tudi povezoval. To konferenco želimo predvsem poudariti potencial mest za prehod v krožno gospodarstvo. In upam, da bomo pač slišali inspirativne in zanimive prezentacije in tudi pač bogato razpravo. Zdaj bi pa jaz pozdravljamo nagovor, kar povabim dr. Andreja Pištrovca, župana Mestne občine.
Dobar dan, dragi spoštovani, lepo pozdravljeni. Bi rekel, kar v krožnem prostoru, bivši veliki kavarni, bivšem kazinoju. Sedaj, ko se čaka na urejanje lastniških odnosov, recikliranem prostoru različnih socialnih in kulturnih praks. Evropa in evropsko gospodarstvo počasi izhajata iz največje krize zadnjih desetletij. Zato so bila v tem kontekstu tudi logična razmišljanja o vzrokih le-te. Sam se pridružujem mnenju tistih, ki menijo, da je treba na to krizo gledati predvsem iz zornega kota krize zavesti. Torej sposobnosti, kako organizirati družbeno reprodukcijo, da le-ta ne bo povratno vplivala na družbo s pojavljanjem novih krčev, novih kriz. Koncept krožnega gospodarstva, ki je v tem času nastal in kjer smo imeli Slovenci po zaslugi našega evropskega komisarja pomemben delež, je odgovor na drugačen pristop celotni družbeni reprodukciji, torej dosedanjem pristopom celotni družbeni reprodukciji. To je pristop, ki se zaveda omejenosti naravnih virov in nujnosti takšnega gospodarjenja z njimi, ki bodo omogočili vedno znova in vedno novo uporabo le-teh. Mestna občina Maribor izvaja strateški projekt B-Cycle na področju krožnega gospodarstva, v katerega so vključena javna komunalna podjetja našega mesta, torej podjetja Energetika, Snaga, Migrat, Vodovod in Marko. V okviru projekta B-Cycle je mesto prepoznalo, da ima danes trenutno identificiranih 18 projektov z področja krožnega gospodarstva, od katerih so prednostni naslednji. Sortirnica, obrat za obdelavo mešanih komunalnih odpadkov, nosilec projekta je Snaga, objekt se gradi. Drugič, tovarna kompozitov, predelava gradbenih in industrijskih odpadkov, nosilec Nigrad, projekt je v podrobnem načrtovanju in upam, da nekje do konca leta bomo tudi pridobili evropska sredstva za to. Tretjič, toplarna na lesno biomaso, energetska izraba neosnažene lesne biomase, nosilec Energetika. Projekt je v podrobnem načrtovanju. Znotraj mesta smo že rezervirali prostor, torej prostor za objekt, ga prostorsko umestili. Četrtič, obdelava bioodpadkov od prebivalstva in iz komunale za proizvodno nove zemljine. Nosilec Snaga, načrtovanje s tem, da del tega projekta že tudi poteka tudi s pomočjo nepovratnih evropskih sredstev. In petič, projekt, ki me nekako najbolj navdihuje, sekundarni mestni krog reciklirane vode, uporaba vode po čiščenju v centralni čistilni napravi, torej to vodo sedaj spuščamo v veliko Dravo in jo želimo zapeljati v nasprotni smeri urinjega kazalca skozi mesto, omogočiti uporabo industriji in tudi za zasneževanje na podporu. Nosilec projekta je vodovod, on je projekt v načrtovanju. Mestna občina Maribor je od leta 2015 vsako leto sprejela strateški dokument na področju, ki ga projekt Recycling pokriva. 2015 strategija ravnanja z odpadki, kjer je sistem krožnega gospodarstva prvič konkretno omenjen. 2016 trajno urbano strategijo, kjer je projekt Recycling že opredeljen kot eden od ključnih razvojnih projektov mesta. 2017 pa še izvedbeni načrt trajnostne urbane strategije, kjer pa so navedene tudi predvidene investicije, kot tudi časovnice za njihovo realizacijo. Mesto Maribor seveda na področju zelenega gospodarstva od idej prehaja k dejanjem. Skupaj s partnerji smo bili uspešni na evropskem razpisu Urban Innovative Action, kjer bo Mariborska občina prejela 2,9 milijona evrov nepovratnih sredstev, s katerimi bo sofinancirala izvedbo pilotnega projekta Urban Soil for Food. Urban Soil for Food, v dobesednem prevodu urbana tla za hrano, se osredotoča na področje upravljanja zemljo kot virom. Ta se, na primer po izvedbenih gradbenih delih, ne odlaga kot odpadek, temveč se vključi v proces nadaljne uporabe in se obogati z uporabo predelanih organskih odpadkov, ki nastajajo pri drugih projekt povezanih procesih. Zemlja predstavlja novo uporabno površino za vrtove, na katerih se proizvaja hrana, ki se vrača v lokalno okolje kot nov resurs. Vse to pa je priložnost za ustvarjanje novih prihodkov, dodane vrednosti, novih zelenih delovnih mest, kot enih glavnih ciljev implementacije inovativnega poslovnega modela. Krog je naravnan izključno lokalno, zato bo vseh 2,9 milijonov zbranih sredstev namenjenih izključno mesto Maribor in vloženih v njegov razvoj. Potem bi povedal, da je to projekt, ki ima še veliko aplikativnih možnosti in ta pristop, še posebej, če ste spremljali dogajanje v umeščanju Magne v prostor, torej veliko industrijsko cono, ki je Maribor že v starem režimu rezerviral za industrijo, torej v Hočah, to je območje 900 hektarjev od Tezna do Hoč, kjer je prišlo do nekega, jaz bi rekel, navideznega konflikta z drugimi uporabniki prostora. Kaj ti vedeti moramo, da je ta prostor že od 70 let rezerviran za industrijsko cono. Torej tam ni drugih aktivnosti raznih kmetijstva, ki pa, to pa je problem razumevanja naših kolegov na kmetijskem ministrstvu, in kakor z konvencionalnimi načini pridelave, torej z uporabo pesticidov in insekticidov, ki zastruplja vodo v potalnici, namreč to je tudi bogato rezervoar pitne vode, ne more ta zemlja biti prvovrstna kmetijska zemlja. Torej ne more biti prvovrstna kmetijska zemlja nekaj, kar v svoji osnovi ni vitalno. No in zato so taki projekti zelo pomembni, ker bomo na ta način ob širitvi industrije v tem delu, ne bom rekel mesta, obmestja in mesta, tudi posega v mesto, lahko razvili ene drugačne modele ustvarjanja vitalne zemljine, ki jo bomo potem lahko uporabljali za, recimo, pridelavo hrane. Na ta način Mariboru začenjamo udejanjati koncept krožnega gospodarstva na način, da smo pri tem vodilno mesto in ne, ker je sicer tudi pozitivno, samo sleditelj. Pri tem bi želel omeniti še projekt Green Cycle, v okviru katerega bo nastala strategija za prehod mesta na krožno gospodarstvo, ki ga izvajamo s partnerji iz alpskega prostora v okviru programa Interreg Alpine Space. Zavedam se izzivov, ki so povezani s pionirstvom. Zato želim, da smo v očeh drugih videni kot pozitivni pilotni projekt, ki bo v naslednjih letih koristil med drugim tudi lokalnim skupnostim drugod po Sloveniji in regiji. Potem bi tudi rad povedal, da je primer dela na projektu okrožnega gospodarstva primer odličnega sodelovanja lokalne skupnosti, lokalnega gospodarstva in državnih institucij, kjer konec koncev, če se vračam nazaj k Magni ali pa k širitvi letališča Maribor, ni mogoče, da samo nekdo sam nekaj stori. Edino skupaj, da lahko storimo še več, kot vsak posebej misli, da želi storiti. Hvala lepa.
Najlepša hvala, gospodu županu. Vesel sem, da je že sam omenil tudi prostor, v katerem se nahajamo, ki seveda ni bil naključna izbira, težko bi pravzaprav našli bolj krožen prostor v Sloveniji in veseli smo, da nas Salon uporabnih umetnosti danes gosti tukaj. Zdaj bi pa povabil besedi gospoda Tadeja Slapnika, državnega sekretarja, predsednika vlade.
Lepa za besedo, spoštovani gospod župan, spoštovani vsi udeleženci in udeleženke današnjega posveta. Tudi mene veseli kar nekaj teh dejstev, ki jih je župan pred mano predstavil, predvsem zaradi tega, ker se potrjuje predvsem v praksi to, kar smo že leta 2015 strani vlade, ko smo začeli z usklajevanjem, s pripravo krovnega nacionalnega programa prehoda Slovenije v zeleno gospodarstvo napovedovali, takrat če mora biti malo vizionarsko, da bo prehod v zeleno krožno gospodarstvo v veliki meri predstavljalo tudi veliko priložnost. In prav mesto Maribor, tudi Republika Slovenija kot država, to dokazuje v praksi, da če določene odločitve kot skupnost, kot država, kot lokalna skupnost, kot regija, sprejmemo pravočasno, če začnemo pri tem sodelovati, če si zastavimo neke realne cilje, da lahko iz teh naredimo veliko konkretnih koristi. In da je mesto Maribor prejšnji teden v konkurenci preko 200 prijaviteljev iz cele Evrope, ob Ljubljani, ki je drugo mesto iz Slovenije, ki je bilo uspešno na že prej omenjenem razpisu, bilo praktično eno izmed 16 uspešnih prijaviteljev na ravni države, se pravi 2 od 16 projektov na evropski ravni, da sta prišla v Slovenijo, je dokaz, da v Mariboru, da v Sloveniji ne samo govorimo, ampak imamo konkretne projekte, ki prepričajo tudi Evropo, ko razpisuje sredstva potrebna za prehod v krožno gospodarstvo. Če bi strnil aktivnosti vlade na tem področju, naj spomnim, da smo za sprejemom programa prehoda v zeleno gospodarstvo leto 2015 najprej upravili domačo nalogo na ravni države, na ravni ministrstev. Velike energije smo vložili, da smo medresorsko uskladili 8 pristojnih ministrstev v nek pogled, kako bomo tranzicijo v zeleno gospodarstvo izpeljali, da smo v nadaljevanju tudi z močno podporo predsednika vlade dr. Mira Cerarja prevzeli koordinacijo tega procesa v kabinetu predsednika vlade, dobili potrebno tudi politično podporo z najviše ravni za vse te procese, ki jih peljemo, se odprli na vzven, povabili k sodelovanju vse vas, deležnike, postavili partnerstvo za zeleno gospodarstvo Slovenije. Preko 100 deležnikov je že oktobra 2016 pristopilo. V nadaljevanju bo kolegica Janja Predmar-Mekenzi podrobneje predstavila, kaj partnerstvo za zeleno gospodarstvo počne in začeli to, materializirano aktivnost izvajati po celi Sloveniji. Mi smo zdaj v letu dni, praktično v vseh regijah, včeraj smo zaključili s posvetom v srednje slovenski regiji, upravili proces priprave kažipota prehoda v krožno gospodarstvo, krovnega dokumenta, s katerim bomo pogledali do leta 2030 naprej, kaj, kako, s katerimi akterji, s katerimi sredstvi, s katerimi viri bomo prehod v krožno gospodarstvo izpeljali. Jaz bi tu dejansko izpostavil najbolj pomemben del vsega tega procesa, to smo mi vsi posamezniki, to ste vsi vi. Vsak posameznik mora najprej začutiti, da je to civilizacijska nuja, kot je predsednik vlade poudaril v nagovoru o krožnem gospodarstvu na Celjskem obrtnem sejmu, da to ni trend, da to ni neka modna muha, ampak da če ne bomo s spremenili poslovnih modelov krožne, da nam bo zmanjkalo virov, da nam naš planet Zemlja ne bo dovolj. In zaradi tega sem tudi zelo vesel, da se je vseh teh aktivnostih preko 2000 posameznikov, posameznic, organizacij, podjetij, skupnosti že pridružilo partnerstvo za zeleno gospodarstvo, da smo z kažopotom, ki ga pripravlja Ministrstvo za okolje in prostor v sklopu aktivnosti partnerstva za zeleno gospodarstvo, tik pred tem, da ga konec novembra tudi predstavimo, da bo v kažopotu, tako imenovanemu roadmapu, da bodo tisti pomembni akteri, mesto Maribor je zagotovo med njimi, pomembni projekti, pomembni tudi gospodarski subjekti, ki kažejo, s kakšnimi koraki gremo naprej in da bomo ta kažopot kot tak, ne samo potem, ko ga bomo skupaj dopolnili v začetku prihodnjega leta, da želimo tudi sprejeti, ampak da ga bomo nadaljevali z njegovim dopolnjevanjem. Da to ne bo nek statični dokument, ampak tako kot smo se danes spominjal prejšnji november lanskega leta začeli za posveti prav v Mariboru krožno gospodarstvo, ko se je nekaj teh načrtov, o katerih smo danes poslušali, šele načrtovalo. Letos vidimo, da so v veliki meri že v realizaciji, pa da je ogromno novih. Jaz verjamem, da tudi v tem kažopotu se bodo aktivnosti dopolnjevale, da bodo rasle, da bo tudi zagotovo veliko takšnih aktivnosti, v katerih danes niti še ne moramo razmišljati, še ne vemo, v katerih poteh bomo šli, ampak predvsem, da bomo to tranzicijo krepili, peljali skupaj in da bomo ostali, to moram povedati, vodilna evropska, pa tudi globalna država na tem področju, da bomo s tem dali priložnost za nova delovna mesta, da bomo s tem dali priložnost za izvoz znanja, za izvoz artiklov produktov, da bomo konec koncev tudi Sriko za krožno gospodarstvo, vemo, ima sedež na Štajerski gospodarski zbornici, tudi v Mariboru, dali priložnost, da nastopi na evropskih, na globalnih trgih in da bomo iz te usmeritve v zeleno gospodarstvo naredili predvsem veliko koristi za vse nas, za državljanke in državljane Republike Slovenije, za naše gospodarstvo in za našo prihodnost. Jaz si zelo želim, da bo današnji posvet o vlogi mest v prehodu v krožno gospodarstvo pokazal to, kar smo naprimer na prvem svetovnem forumu krožnega gospodarstva letos pomladi v Helsinkih poslušali s primeri dobrih praks evropskih prestolnic, pokazal, da se krožno gospodarstvo v največji meri, največji pestrosti materializira prav v mestih. Tako večina najmočnejšega gospodarstva je skoncentriranega v mestih, tako vse funkcije upravljanja mest so najbolj vidne in z največjimi izzivi se izrazijo na mestih in tudi, ko se mesta odločijo, pa naj se bo to Maribor, naj se bo to Ljubljana, tudi Kočevje, eno manjših mest, da gredo po poti krožnega gospodarstva, so to res neki taki zelo konkretni projekti, ki se kažejo v novih delovnih mestih, v razvoju, v nekem čist drugačnem krožnem pristopu. Jaz vam želim na današnji konferenci dejansko, da boste poleg navdihujočih primerov dobrih praks, ki nas nemalokrat tudi upogumijo, nam dajo nekaj razmišljanja, kako lahko po nekem vzoru ali pa z nekimi izkušnjami drugih neke stvari, neke aktivnosti izpeljamo sami bolje, da to domislite, da tudi naredite neka nova zavezništva, nova partnerstva in da predvsem se vključite v aktivnost potem sprejetja roadmapa za krožno gospodarstvo, da če bo v njem že o predstavitvi novembra, konec novembra, kaj manjkalo, kaj takega, kar zagotovo sodi v njega, dajte se obrniti na skupino, ki to pripravlja, priključite se te aktivnosti, ker dejansko predstavlja veliko priložnost za Slovenijo, za mesta, za skupnosti in se dejansko veselim tako prihodnjega leta, ko bomo z kažopotom dejansko stopili na pot njegove realizacije, kot vse te prihodnosti, ki je pred nami. Če bomo tako z smelimi koraki, kot sedaj, naprimer Maribor, Slovenija, stopa na področju krožnega gospodarstva nadaljevali, se lahko veselimo prihodnosti. Hvala za vašo pozornost.
pač pomemben se mi zdi ta poudarek, da se krožno gospodarstvo dejansko odvija v mestih. Še bolj zanimivo za Slovenijo je to, da imajo tukaj, kot bomo tudi kasneje slišali v predavanjih, večjo priložnost mala in srednje velika mesta, ki so seveda za Slovenijo edina, ki jih imam na nek način. Tako da zdaj bi pa povabil tudi nosilno ministrstvo, ki je pristojno za mesta in sicer generalno direktorico Direktorata za prostor, graditev in stanovanja z Ministrstva za okolje in prostor, gospod Barbara Radovan, da nas še pozdrav.
En zelo lep pozdrav v mojem imenu, posebej gospod župan, gospod državni sekretar, gospodje, sodelavci, kolegi. Moja predhodnika sta pravzaprav že vse povedala, ampak ne glede na to, bom tudi jaz seveda ta svoj prispevek, ki smo ga pripravili za ta uvodni del, podala, ampak hvala absolutno pa za uvodne besede in državnega sekretarja in župana. Torej, vloga mest v prostorskem in družbenem razvoju je posebna. Večina razvojnih izzivov današnje družbe je zgoščenih v mestih, v mestih živi večina prebivalcev, njihov delež se v Evropi in svetu še vedno povečuje. Mesta so gonilo gospodarskega in socialnega razvoja in središče inovacij. Tako kot v Evropi in svetu in tudi v Sloveniji, vloga mest ključna za gospodarski razvoj države in njeno uspešnost. Večina delovnih mest v Sloveniji je v mestih in mesta so torej središče gospodarskega razvoja in inovacij. Čeprav majhna v evropskem merilu, lahko slovenska mesta svojo prihodnost in konkurenčnost gradijo na temelju kakovostnega delovnega in bivalnega okolja, ki je dobro vključeno v prometne tokove ter povezani s svojim zaledjem. Za trajnostni urbani razvoj je Slovenija v trenutni finančni perspektivi namenila 117 milijonov evrov evropskih sredstev, s katerimi bodo mestne občine v svojih središčnih mestih financirale svoje razvojne projekte. Trajnostni urbani razvoj podpira prehod v zeleno, krožno gospodarstvo. Prehod v krožno gospodarstvo je po eni strani nuja, po drugi pa tudi velika priložnost, saj poleg pomembnih okoljskih prinaša tudi gospodarske in družbene koristi. Za uspešen prehod v zeleno gospodarstvo potrebujemo lokalnim razmeram prilagojene rešitve, ki upoštevajo značilnosti in priložnosti, ki jih prostor ponuja. Razvoj celovitih in pametnih rešitev za zagotavljanje povezanosti vsebin gospodarskega, socialnega in kulturnega razvoja ter reševanje okoljskih problemov za izboljšanje kakovosti bivanja njihovih prebivalcev je seveda nujna. Veseli me, da so slovenska mesta na tem področju uspešna, o čemer pričajo tudi uspehi pri izboru primerov dobrih urbanih praks. Na razpis za izbor dobrih praks programa Urban so bile izbrani 3 slovenski primeri iz 2 mest. V okviru pobude za inovativne urbane projekte pa 2 slovenski mesti, med njimi, kot že povedano, z 2 strani tudi Maribor. Zato bi na tem mestu se čestitala županu, njegovi ekipi, zato da je ta projekt dobil podporo. Za današnji dogodek pa seveda želim vsem nam uspešno delo in hvala organizatorjem oziroma soorganizatorjem za to, da bo dogodek uspešno izpeljal, ker seveda nekako ne dvomim. Hvala.
Hvala lepa tudi generalni direktorici. Zdaj pa preden nadaljujemo z še bolj poglobljenimi prispevki, vas lahko povabim, spredaj so 3 vrste skoraj prazne. Tisti, ki ste bolj zadnji, lahko tudi naprej pridete, da boste kaj boljš videli in slišali. Zdaj, prvi, veliko daljši vsebinski prispevek bo imela predstavnica Ministrstva spet za okolje in prostor, ampak ne le to, pač pa tudi namestnica vodje partnerstva za zeleno gospodarstvo, magistra Janja Krajtner-McKenzie, ki na ministrstvu sodeluje na področju politik zelenega in krožnega gospodarstva ter razvoja mest. Njeno predavanje z naslovom Prehod v krožno gospodarstvo in mesta, aktivnosti partnerstva za zeleno gospodarstvo Slovenije. Prosim, Janja.
Hvala za to predstavitev. Lep pozdrav prav vsem tudi z moje strani. Gospod župan, državni sekretar, seveda, and hello also to our international guests. Thank you for coming to Slovenia. I prepared my presentation in English, but I'm going to speak in Slovenian since we have translations. Sorry. Torej, skušala bom povedati mogoče malo več, kaj delamo v partnerstvu za zeleno gospodarstvo in tudi kako vidimo vlogo mest pri prehodu v krožno gospodarstvo. Torej, kot je že državni sekretar omenil, ko Slovenija sprejela okvirni program za prehod v zeleno gospodarstvo, je tudi ustanovila partnerstvo za zeleno gospodarstvo prav z namenom, da bi aktivirala vse deležnike v Sloveniji in pravzaprav nekako podprla ta proces in da bi bila naprej. Kar je mogoče pomembno pri partnerstvu je, da ima medsektorsko skupino na visoki ravni, ki je na ravni državnih sekretarjev, ki se sestaja tudi v okviru te skupine in pa seveda razširja na partnerstvo na vse deležnike v Sloveniji. Zdaj imamo že več kot 2000 partnerjev in to sodelovanje nam je neprecenljivega pomena, ker seveda skozi primere dobrih praks in izkušnje podjetij, nevladnih organizacij, ki delajo na tem področju, so pravzaprav neprecenljiv vir znanja za nas. Partnerstvo je tudi odprtega tipa, se pravi, skozi prihajajo novi partnerji, vsak je dobrodošel, povezujemo se tudi mednarodno, tako da to je ena taka živa oblika. Seveda, v tem nam je bilo pomembno, ko smo se najprej odločili za ta proces, da smo si nekako zadali tudi svoje naloge. Seveda, država ima nalogo vzpostaviti sistemske spremembe, prilagoditi finančne mehanizme in povezati politike in ukrepe. Partnerji pa seveda so vir znanja, primeri dobrih praks in predvsem pa tudi udejanjajo ta prehod s temi svojimi aktivnostmi. V Sloveniji, moram reči, kot je tudi že Tadej omenil, je ogromno primerov dobrih praks in če delaš na tem, nekako se ti prvi zdi, da smo zelo veliko že tudi naredili in te prakse dokazujejo, da pravzaprav se to res da, dokazujejo tudi, da se splača in so tudi najboljši učitelj eni drugemu. Tukaj so seveda podjetja in druge organizacije pa naša mesta, ki so pravzaprav zdaj že kar na mednarodni ravni zelo priznana za primere posebej iz Maribora pa Ljubljane, jih poznajo tako na komisiji kot v drugih državah, pa tudi drugi nam so pomembno pravzaprav tudi druga manjša mesta in lokalne skupnosti, kar bom bolj malo predstavlja, pač vidimo velike potenciale za prehod v krožno. Seveda, ker je prehod v zeleno ali krožno gospodarstvo je proces, ki zahteva, da se vsi spremenimo. V bistvu moramo vse spremeniti način, kako delamo. Ne rabimo novih stvari, ampak moramo delati na drugačen način. In to je tudi mogoče ključna vloga tega partnerstva skupaj z vsemi partnerji, seveda ne samo država, lahko naredi pravzaprav mora bolj podporo nuditi, pa udejanjati te spremembe na svoji ravni. Predvsem so pa tukaj ključni prav vsi, tako državljani, posamezniki, kot seveda vsi ostali deležniki. In zato, da se pa to lahko zgodi, moramo pa delati vsi skupaj. Brez skupnega dela pravzaprav zelo težko obvladamo te spremembe, rabimo in drugega, povezovati se moramo danes na drugačen način, kot smo se včasih. To je tako zaradi direktne izmenjave resursov in znanja, kot tudi zaradi samega storitev in uslug, ki jih rabimo, ki jih pač med sabo povezujemo in skupaj lahko naredimo dosti več. No, mesta so pa pri tem za nas tudi ključni partneri, zdaj bom pa, ker je to dogodek na temo mesta, malo še povedala, kako mi vidimo vlogo mesta pri prihodu na krožno gospodarstvo. To je že omenjen, tudi vsi vemo, da je vedno več organizacij, seveda torej vemo, da so mesta prostori, kjer je veliko priložnosti za povezovanje. Seveda pa je treba znati te stvari povezovati. Zato rabiš tudi podporna orodja, ki ti pomagajo razumeti informacije, da res lahko, da znaš mapirati vse resurse, ki jih imaš v mestu, imaš jih pa veliko in ker mesto zagotavlja veliko storitev, je s tem tudi zelo pomemben akter, ki lahko povezuje stvari. Poleg tega ima mesto tudi vpliv na ljudi, na razmišljanje ljudi, ima direkten kontakt s svojimi prebivalci, lahko je trendsetter, kot se reče, lahko spreminja miselnost, lahko bolj podpira recimo podjetja z krožnimi modeli in daje spodbudo, da se recimo v mestu razvijajo. Mesta pa so seveda tudi izvajalci vseh politik skoraj, kje pride na lokalni raven. Zdaj rečem mesta, lahko so tudi manjše lokalne skupnosti, ampak tukaj se vse zgodi in tukaj se vidi tudi zelo dobro, kje stvari ne funkcionirajo, kje jih je treba še povezati, kje jih je treba izboljšati, kakšne vrste mogoče specifičnih mehanizmov tudi mesta potrebujejo za to. Tako da bi povedala, da zaradi tega se je Slovenija tudi kot država z dvema ministrstvoma, Ministrstvo za okolje in prostor in Ministrstvo za gospodarstvo in tehnologijo, skupaj z mestom Maribor, smo zelo veseli, da sodelujemo z več mesti v Sloveniji, vključila kot partner v partnerstvo v okviru urbane agende, partnerstvo za krožno gospodarstvo v mestih. Ravno zaradi tega, ker se nam je zdelo zanimivo, ker je to, tisti, ki poznate urbano agendo, mogoče tudi to zgodbo malo poznate, teh partnerstv je več tema, so pa zanimive zaradi tega, ker so zelo konkretna, ko bodo imela rezultata na področju izboljšanja politik, izboljšanja finančnih inštrumentov in izboljšanja znanja na način, da bo to recimo na ravni sporočila komisije, če poznate te dokumente Evropske komisije, in bo šlo tudi na Evropski svet, imelo pa neposredno vpliv tudi na kohezijsko politiko. Tako da skozi to delamo z roko v roki s tem prehodom tudi v Sloveniji in skozi to želimo tudi uveljaviti naše cilje tudi na tej ravni. Mogoče tukaj samo kjer 4 teme so trenutno opredeljene, znotraj tega pa seveda se najde verjetno prav vse. To partnerstvo je malo tudi povezovalno, ker seveda so tudi druge teme, spadajo potem v circular economy in znotraj tega imamo pa circular governance, te pa skupaj Slovenija z Evropsko investicijsko banko in Valonsko regijo vodi to temo, na teme smo se pač tako razdelili, kjer bomo pa pravzaprav tudi zelo horizontalno probali sinergijo ustvariti med rezultati, tako tega partnerstva kot drugi. Tako da na City forumu, ki ga organizira Evropska komisija letos v Rotterdamu, bo naše partnerstvo tudi imelo eno delavnico, kjer bomo skušali dobiti čim več mnenj od čim širšega števila deležnikov in vrste deležnikov. Zdaj pa nazaj mogoče na to partnerstvo v Sloveniji. Kaj počnemo? To je samo nekaj stvari, aktivnosti ogromno. Predvsem, mogoče čisto v tej prvi fazi, ko smo začeli, ko smo rabili se sploh odločiti kot Slovenija, kot država in kot vsi resori, da je to naš cilj, da gremo v to smer, smo mapirali vse aktivnosti, ki jih imajo resori in so povezane z zelenim pa krožnim gospodarstvom. Tako da v bistvu jih tudi spremljamo in jih probamo izboljšati. To je bil nekako ta prvi korak za državo, da se je nekako rekla, da so se vsi zavedali, ja, to je res en proces, kjer smo vsi noter vključeni. Ni tako, da to res delo nima to veze s krožnim. Seveda, te stvari so žive, to se nadgrajuje, se širi, znanje se veča. Veliko je bilo tudi vloženega v izobraževanje ali pa ozaveščanje tudi v javni upravi, tudi na najvišjem nivoju. Predsednik vlade je organiziral posvet, kjer je prišel Janez Potočnik, mogoče ga nekateri poznate še kot komisarja za okolje, ki je svetovno priznan strokovnjak na področju krožnega gospodarstva in so bili tudi vsi ministri in se v bistvu te stvari tudi na tak način dogajajo. Potem imamo posvetovanja v regijah. To nam je zelo pomembno, ker želimo res zajeti celo Slovenijo in vse, od spodaj navzgor. To nam pomaga identificirati dodatne dobre prakse, deležnike, ki se želijo priključiti. Predvsem pa tudi skozi to hočemo opredeliti potencialne regije oziroma jih prepoznati in se pravzaprav specifično za Slovenijo opredeliti priložnosti za krožno. Seveda imamo razne dogodke, letni dogodek je tudi urbani forum, ki smo zdaj že bili pri mestih, kjer imamo že tretji zaporedoma, smo imeli na teme zelenega in krožnega gospodarstva. Najbolj zanimiv del tega foruma je poleg primerov dobrih praks to, da imamo program za županov in vsi župani so vedno res super in zelo veliko rezultatov dobimo iz tega, kar se tako skušamo pogovarjati in se ne bo več. Potem skozi ta proces, ker imamo to veliko dela, ker delamo s partnerji, sproti tudi zagotavljamo ozka grla. Ta ozka grla probamo kar sproti tudi reševati, ker kot veste, velike sistemske spremembe, če si jih lotiš celovito, se zgodijo pohekdaj ali pa nikoli. Tako pa imamo potem, mogoče delamo tudi majhne korake in majhne korake so tudi pomembni, ker udejanjajo te spremembe, tudi dokazujejo, da se da in da se da res včasih z majhnimi popravki zelo veliko izboljšati. Stvari dobimo pa neprecenljivo veliko predlogov, konkretnih predlogov prav iz primerov dobrih praks, prav naših partnerjev, ki to delajo in ki točno vejo, ki se dotika in marsikaj se zares da enostavno rešiti. Se pravi, veliko tudi potem delamo na tem, da partnerje med sabo povezujemo, zato da se lahko recimo izboljšajo svoje poslovne modele. Tega je kar veliko, ker se velikrat med sabo ne poznajo. Slovenija je šla kot država, tudi si včlanila v fundacijo Ellen MacArthur, če jo poznate, je ena svetovna, najbolj priznana organizacija na področju razvijanja znanja za krožno gospodarstvo. In v Sloveniji imamo potem tudi multiplikatorje, ki to znanje, ki se vključujejo v te izobraževalne programe in to znanje lahko razširjajo potem na vse deležnike prebivalce. To se je zdaj mogoče šele začeti, tako da ne vem, če vsi v Sloveniji to poznate, ampak načeloma bi mogli kmalu to spoznati. Seveda imamo tudi v pametni specializaciji en od 9 SRIP-ov. SRIP-i se reče strateški inovacijski, razvojni inovacijski programi. Imamo SRIP recimo za krožno, pa tudi za pametna mesta. Z njimi tudi sodelujemo. SRIP-i pravzaprav vzpostavljajo velike vrednosti, ki imajo svoje akcijske programe in bodo financirali razvoj na teh področjih, tako da tudi se povezujemo in bomo z roko v roki tudi sodelovali, ko bomo naprej prioritete Slovenije še naprej razvijali. In pa vzpostavljamo stičišče za krožno gospodarstvo Slovenije, to pa na povabilo Svetovnega ekonomskega foruma. Slovenija je bila prepoznana pač tudi mednarodno, da je veliko korakov naredila na tem področju in smo povabljeni skupaj za Nizozemsko in Finsko, da smo za Evropsko regijo skupaj postanemo pač to stičišče. Tako da to smo zdaj jih na tem, da bo šlo ven vabilo, tukaj bodo tudi vsi partnerji povabljeni, da lahko sodelujo, takrat bo malo več tudi razložen. In mogoče še za konec, kako naprej. Že prej sem omenila, da pač zdaj smo v fazi odpiranja in identificiranja potencialov v Sloveniji za krožno gospodarstvo, za pripravo pač kažipota za prehod v krožno gospodarstvo. Kažipot je že omenil tudi državni sekretar. Se mi zdi mogoče povedati, da smo si ga zastavili kot proces, bolj kot dokument. Ravno zaradi tega, ker si želimo čim širše lastništvo in ne želimo, da bi to nek vladni ali pa ex-katedra dokument, ampak da nastaja skupaj z ljudmi, tako da je zelo pomemben tudi komunikacijski načrt in pa seveda delo skupno, ker se pravzaprav že zdaj začelo skozi te posvete in tudi naprej. In si želimo, da bi na ta način nam uspeli tudi razširiti to idejo in spodbuditi še več pač partnerjev za prvi korake za ta prehod. In tako. Imamo spletno stran, ki je žal samo v slovenščini za enkrat, čeprav nekaj dokumentov imamo tudi v angliščini, pa Facebook page tudi v slovenščini. Hvala za pozornost.
Če bi kdo želel kakšno vprašanje postaviti relevantnici na temo partnerstva, recimo?
Mogoče pol neformalno da lažje.
Ok. Se to sliši, ja. Velja, potem bi pa prešli kar na naslednje predavanje dr. Kaja Vemeja z naslovom ESPON Territorial Futures o krožnem gospodarstvu in njegovi teritorijalni oziroma prostorski dimenziji. Kaj Veme je ustanovitelj in direktor podjetja Special Foresight s sedežem v Luksemburgu in na današnjem predavanju bo predstavil na nek način vizijo, kako bi evropsko ozemlje, evropski prostor izgledal, če bi delovalo v celoti 100% kot krožno gospodarstvo. Kaj, please? Yeah. time.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, and well, thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation. It's really a pleasure being here. Well, Marco asked me to say a few words about a project we're working on for ASPON, and I'm not sure everybody knows what ASPON really is, so maybe I say a few words about ASPON so that you can place it a little bit in the context. And by the way, sorry for speaking English, but my Slovenian is simply inexistent, so you wouldn't like to cope with that. Well, ASPON is an EU program in the same type as URBACT, and it basically commissions studies on territorial development issues in order to advise member states, European Commission, how policies could be shaped. And one of those studies that they tendered was to say, what would Europe look like if it were a fully place-based circular economy by 2030? We tendered for that study, well, that was one of the points only, but we tendered for it and we were successful, so we were sitting there saying, okay, how do we actually do that? We have to look into the future, saying, what does Europe anyway look like in 2030? And then we have to understand what is a fully place-based circular economy and how does that change what Europe would look like. And before I give you the results of that project, I will tell you a little bit about our approach to both looking to the future and also conceptualizing the fully place-based circular economy. So again, giving you a little bit background. And I also have to admit, when we started, we thought, actually it's a boring project. Because what we're asked to do is to look into a happy ever after story. Saying, well, circular, place-based economy is just all the right words. And so it should be a good picture. And looking into what does a European territory look like in a picture that everybody wants, felt really like strange thing. We have to come up with a really exciting result, and it has to be happy ever after. You will figure out it is not happy ever after for everybody. Also in that game there are actually winners and losers in the end, and we try to identify a little bit of that. But it was a challenge, and also always a challenge when we presented, because obviously both place-based decision-making and circular economy are very positive concepts, and then it's difficult to judge or argue that some people might not be that happy with it in the end. That's so much as an intro. When we talk about the future, and we are usually quite excited about our plans, about what we want to do, what is coming, or we are very scared of what is coming. So there's a lot of ideas around, and we thought we need to find a way. And just one of the brainstormings we had on what Europe might look like in the future, we put in a few pictures. So basically by 2020, sorry guys, but the EU will break down. Plus that, we can't agree on the next budget, that won't happen. By 2024, it doesn't actually matter anymore because robots take over, so politics, policy-making countries, unions, don't care. It's all kind of rational, organized, so we are very fine. A few years later, by 2032, the world is too small. We discover the universe and settle out there somewhere. Which is an advantage because by 2048, climate change really hits. The computers obviously didn't calculate everything completely correct, and we move into submarines because it is all boring. And 2050, we realize it was all fake news and just a social media hype. But those are the things we usually get when we ask people about the future. So how do we then actually go about to research in an uncertain future and say, okay, a little bit more seriously, a little bit more realistic than those kind of standard concerns. So if you then look into what kind of a foresight process usually does, it is very much building upon that we don't know a lot about the future, but that if we get enough people from very different domains together, with very different perspectives, very different ideas, very different backgrounds, and engage really in discussions and in joint thinking about possible developments, about possible fears or possible changes and territorial impacts, then we are getting a little bit further. And of course, you always need to draw a fine line because that can go any direction. So just having a lot of people discussing doesn't mean you necessarily end up with a solid answer. So there are a number of things to come out of it. But it usually builds really on engaging a lot of people because we don't have any models, we don't have any data that can predict how it will be. So we need to balance different pieces of information, different insights that are not really there. And by that also engage quite a wide group. And for this project we did actually run 2 European-wide very broad participatory process. We invited very, very broadly. We had 2 additional expert workshops with really experts that are more into details of the circular economy. We ran 2 online surveys and of course did a lot of data checks and background research to bring all that together and have a picture of what is a likely version of it. What are the kind of most obvious patterns? And of course it's meant to inform also decision making, not just being a study which is nice to know. And that is kind of very much what Foresight does in general. What ESPON asks us is to do really a territorial foresight. So put really the territorial dimension, meaning the local regional dimension in a European context at the forefront. And so if we with this foresight can get a feeling for the future, that how do we really now figure out how does it change the territorial patterns in Europe? And for that we borrowed some ideas from a tool of a territorial impact assessment that is used to assess policies at the present to say, are there territorial consequences for certain types of regions or certain types of areas? And we combined those 2 things.
I just want to question this one, sorry because I interrupted you. Thank you for the word. I will just interrupt you for a second, and here is one question which is included with this topic and the slides which you are presenting about. I have a question about the left non-territorial demand and foreign thinking. Do you have any tangible technical solution how to find out which, I would say, approach or activities are necessary to be done in the context of richness, prosperity, and the way to territorial foresight in your region answer?
Well, I think we have kind of, in the terms of the research process, we have developed a number of techniques, which I won't have. We have published the report and the guide. And in terms of what needs to happen in order to meet territorial dimensions of place-based circular economy, that's kind of what I'm going to present. So basically what we did then was really a lot of workshops and trying really together with different people from different parts of Europe, from different sectors of society, to see which are the preconditions for a circular economy, which are the consequences of that, what type of territories might affect, how do those things interlink, etc. So, and what we basically then, if we move to really kind of working on circular economy, came up as that usually a lot of people, when we read policy documents about circular economy, it's about the production process. And yes, that's very important, but actually we also think the use of material resources, kind of the consumption side, that also was highlighted in the previous presentation, is an important dimension which we need to take into account. And then we had on top of that also the place-based dimension, seeing how do we do with that. Well, if you look into the production side, the assumption was that the part is of course reducing waste to a minimum, making sure that the value of products and resources remains in the economy, and that's all very much the usual approach that you find with kind of industrial symbiosis processes, recycling. So, but in our discussions, is that if we take that seriously, there's actually another point which comes quite to the forefront of the discussion of the results. That we will produce less. If we do everything more efficient and we use resources longer, we use products longer, we don't recycle, we reuse, it means the amount of simple production probably goes down. We probably produce more high quality products that can be used longer, not kind of buy a mobile phone, use it a year, throw it away, buy the next one. So there is a number of things which of course has an impact on our production patterns in Europe. And the same is, well, all the products that we have will be reused, repaired, recycling, which also has an impact on which types of activities in which types of territories there will be. So that was kind of, on that side, that's what we really need to look into and find out where are the territorial dimensions of that. On the consumption side, well, if we go a little bit beyond just saying circular economy is about the use of resources, it is also about all the aspects of a sharing economy, saying it's not that we need to own something, but it's actually that we use it. So it shifts a component here. And again, that has an impact of where can I do those things, or where are difficulties, where are opportunities for different types of territories, because also this sharing economy, actually, if we look into it, has a territorial dimension. And of course, that always then hinted at this debate which we never really engaged with, prosperity. What is then in a circular economy actually prosperity? Is GDP the perfect measure if we say that actually things are changing, so we actually go beyond GDP in our understanding of prosperity? Then the other part of it, which said we should look into a place-based solution. We had here very extreme discussions of saying place-based means we only can rely on local products and local resources, which we wind up and saying, well, we still need to make a decent life also in a place-based context. We can't just say it's you and your village and what is not there is not there. So with that, it's more of making the best out of your local or regional resources. But there is still transport, there's still trade, there is still migration. It's just kind of making best use of what you have and also involving local people, local decision making is much more in the process. So that was basically the understanding with which we, through the processes, set out and saying, how does that impact on Europe? And then we said, well, it's not just straightforward impacting on Europe. It's actually impacting on a development of quite a number of different trends that at the moment influence territorial development in Europe. And don't worry, I won't take you through all of that. But I think the four cornerstones in the middle, basically we see renewing industries, kind of in particular fourth industrial revolution, and those aspects are playing an important role. We see also the environmental discussion playing an important role in those aspects, how to deal with the challenges coming from that side. Demographic pressures of migration, aging, which is very different across Europe, and which shape it. And then the question, how does a circular economy come into that picture? And democratic decision making, how do we actually make decisions? Also, that is something that's constantly changing in Europe or in the world. And again, if we look at circular economy, then we want to have more local involvement, more governance, that will also have an influence there. So, that's kind of all the context that we try to put into the discussion and elaborate it step by step. And now a few of the territorial dimensions of it. So if you look at the production, we assume that there are quite a number of substantial impacts on the European production systems. And here I'm really talking about Europe. I'm not kind of thinking about a single city or a single region. So it's at a very abstract level. But large-scale manufacturing will see a transition. So kind of having large-scale manufacturing that is centrally produced and shipped throughout Europe, and also often based on recent updates or frequent reproduction cycles, will change in a circular economy if we say, well, actually we have less large-scale production, we have less new products and more focus on keeping products in the life cycles, etc. Which means that a number of the industrial hotspots, kind of the big centers in Europe, will see transition challenges. So they have a lot of, take, I don't know, German automotive industry. They might not need to produce a new car for everybody every year. So there are changes that those kind of industrial production sites will need to adjust to, in particular the large-scale ones. But it also has an impact on the transport sector. If we don't do that, what happens to the transport hubs like Antwerp and Rotterdam, which live off the bulk of goods that we are shipping across the world and successively in Europe's different centers. So there are a number of those really big hubs which will face a kind of a transition challenge and might decline in importance. They still will be there. It's not that they disappear, but it becomes very clear that for them. We also know that doing everything into a circular economy, there's quite a number of innovations that are needed. It's not that we have the answers for all the processes. We looked into the research and saying, where is the research on those things going on? And we actually found out that research on circular economy issues is very concentrated. It's not that every university, Maribor, Ljubljana, Torino, Graz, everybody could do that. It could, but when you look where the patterns are, where the big developments are, it's very much kind of Northern Europe, Northwestern Europe. There's a huge head start for those, which means there might be in a very quick move an advantage for those areas to actually lead the way. Then the use will be overall, but the benefit of being the front runners in the researching thing seems to be not very balanced distribution across Europe. Then, as I said earlier, we believe that if we take it seriously, there will be much more focus on repair and reuse, which can be organized in much more small-scale levels. So that's something that actually can be rolled out in a lot of medium-sized cities, saying, here we can have the crafts that can, hey, go with your mobile phone. Isn't the latest one anymore, but still, can you make it work again? And therefore, you don't need to ship it back to China, but you can actually do that if you have the craftsmen quite decentralized. Also, all the topics of 3D printing and these kind of producting processes would focus on medium-sized or smaller places that can get a chance to grow into those things. So on the production side, what we see is basically, you see a little bit the very abstract level of thing. Also green dots saying we see a lot of growth possibilities for areas that are not so much in the core at the moment. We still see a few areas that are probably leading the way in terms of technological change. And we see a risk of decline in the number of industrial areas. Those maps, don't look at them and try to find exactly your location or your city. We have, by on purpose, deviated from the standard European map because there's so much uncertainty in it. And we have accumulated so much different insights and knowledge in it that it gives a very rough picture. And the main purpose is to say, well, maybe if that is what we approach, we need to think about policies, how to accommodate those changes. And then if we move to the use side, as I said, well, for us it's not only about production, it's also about using aspects. And again, we have the repair, recycle, and reuse aspect, and we looked a little bit into waste and then household waste. It would be something that needs to change because people need to change their attitude in terms of usage, and that should lead to basically almost zero household waste in the end, in an ideal case. And we figured out that, well, there are populations across Europe, but there is one very clear pattern that sticks out, that is tourist areas. High tourist areas, kind of if you count household waste per inhabitant, are kind of basically getting extremely high because of the number of tourists. So there seems to be a particular challenge for very touristic areas to adapt to that because as a tourist you have slightly less aware attitude for those weeks you are on holiday. So there is something. We looked also into the sharing economy, and that was basically that should be something for all places. And here we didn't think so much about Airbnb and all those big ones, but we rather thought about very localized things where you say, okay, I have a very specialized machine and I use it only twice a year for my garden, but my neighbors can use that as well. So those aspects are not the kind of big global players in it. And again, that works in most places, but you need a certain critical mass. If I want to borrow a drill from my neighbor is 5 kilometers away, it's getting difficult. So in particular then for more peripheral areas, and we have also in the center of Europe quite a number of very sparsely populated areas. that shift might be a particular challenge, where we need to think about different kinds of solutions, how to work around those things. So it's not saying it's not possible, but critical mass helps in a certain way. And then, yeah, changing understanding of prosperity and GDP, we looked very much into governance issues, saying, well, where are we in terms of governance approaches, trust in governance? We had huge discussions about really trusting. If I want to change anything, I need to have a culture where I happily borrow you my thing and know I get it back in a decent shape, and not getting it back if it's broke or whatever it is. So we had huge discussions. It was interesting to see the different cultures in Europe. The German colleagues always wanted to formalize and legalize everything, and you need to write 5 guarantees before you get anything borrowed. Others were much more free-giving. So there are a number of things in there. Well, basically, what we then figured out in terms of the mapping and data things, there are, yes, the kind of red-striped areas, which are these kind of challenge areas because of the tourist sector playing an important role in that kind of really at the moment there are based strategies and based statistics. Then we have the kind of forerunners in a number of recycling and sharing economy issues. And just again, to not just depict the exact point in Europe, but to raise awareness that these are patterns that have a territorial dimension, and where we need to think about what that means for our territories in the long run, and how we can work with that, how we can use them, or how we can make sure we counterbalance them with other actions. Then we looked at the place-based aspect, and here we mainly looked then at the transport side and saying, well, as I said earlier, we still believe that trade and migration, that does happen, just at a different scale. And seeing basically, as I also said earlier, major transport hubs declining in their importance, so kind of the big ports, and in particular then also international export-import patterns. So if you heavily rely on global trade, that might become much more difficult. And here we then also saw basically those areas where, well, these are always fight with colleagues from Northern Europe saying, why do you put everything here? You used to be on the top of everything, and now you say we are the ones that are in decline. But for them, the transition challenge might be largest because they are very highly profiled in the current system. If such a drastic change comes, the transition there is quite substantial. But the next step was then to put all that into a question, does it contribute to more territorial balance or imbalance in Europe, if you really see around the continent and not in cities or in regions? And we ran a number of different exercises to look at socioeconomic, demographic aspects, environment, technology. As I put here slides about my time, I don't go into detail. The overall part that comes out is really that moving over the next 10, 15 years to a fully place-based circular economy, which is a very ideal assumption, comes with quite dramatic changes. It's nothing that we do and we say we continue living and working as we do. And it actually may imply that the disparities we see at a European scale between the economically strong and weak areas may decline. So there might actually be a positive contribution to it as an economic challenge is heavier on a number of the leading areas. We also see quite a potential for small and medium-sized places, and in particular this kind of more localized, more regionalized recycling, small-scale production helps there. But if you're going into sparsely populated areas, inner peripheries actually can be even more challenging than what their situation is at the moment. So there we see a number of issues to tackle. And also kind of for areas that are very transport dependent, be it in order to get product there or being in transport hubs. That is a challenging material. And networking and driving innovation, there are still some leading areas which might have a certain advantage, but that also needs to be seen. So that would be the combined map, just kind of, again, trying to give an image that if we talk about a fully place-based circular economy, that is where we are heading at. And I found that kind of, as I said in the beginning, very interesting, because I had the feeling we work with a happy ever after scenario, and everything is just brilliant and bright. And there's a lot of potential in it, but it also means if you really want that, we need to work with the policies to make sure it works nicely and doesn't put certain areas, certain types of regions or cities in a bad position in the long run. And make sure that others use the potential they have had. So that kind of brings me, I don't know, how do you do time-wise? Okay. Brings me to the last part, saying that is basically a vision. And for me, visions are nice as a kind of set-outs, a coherent picture of where we want to go. But visions remain daydreams if we don't kind of relate actions to it. And as we have also seen, kind of actions without a vision kind of easily turn into nightmares. So we need to make such one. I was very happy to hear in the previous statements that kind of you try really to link those to them, and we have this vision of the circular economy, and we try to put actions to it to make those things happening. And, well, maybe shortly coming back, what we figured out, we developed the approach for territory for that basically on the fly. We got the contract and we had to start, and then we worked on it. And well, we now finalizing a handbook of how to do it, which will be published on the ESPON website. But I had the feeling it actually works quite well to kind of approach those very complex topics. And then we don't know a lot, but if we bring the right people together that know different part of it, we can get very far and can really also understand the territorial consequences. We had some of those exercises, we had people that only work locally with the European map, saying, can you draw that on a European map? It took a few hours to get them in, but actually we have a lot of knowledge that if we use that, that can work. And what we would like to test is, now we have tested that as a European scale, but from the approach I think it should be equally possible to do that nationally, regionally, locally. So the approach seems to be fine. And then one part of that has got into a report that was published last week at the Open Days in Brussels. The ESPON tried to say, okay, where are the territorial future in Europe with a strong focus on cooperation? And there we have managed to get in a particular section on the circular economy, on the results of that project. And here we focus on also something that has come up in the previous talks, a lot on cooperation. All of that is nothing you can do on your own, as you always need to cooperate with other territories. You know, it's just, that is a map that doesn't come from us in that project, but which I thought was interesting. That is, if you don't cooperate in Europe, then basically that map says how it goes. So if we assume that everybody is on its own, and we don't really cooperate, overall our GDP will decline, and disparities, I mean, GDP decline will be lower in Germany and surrounding, and higher in other parts. But it is kind of a very telling picture of how important it is actually to decline, to work together on different things. And that's kind of also what we have seen here, is that we actually need not only to understand how a place as an individual place functions, but we need to see that those places are interlinked, this kind of trade, migration, cooperation. And only if we understand that, we understand the complexity of how those things can go together. And that's kind of what we have elaborated in this foresight approach related to the circular economy, and that has kind of carried over into that ESPON report. And here is, if you don't want to read the full report, then you just take a picture of that QR code, because the report is organized as a web report where you can say, I'm interested in this kind of territory, I'm interested in this kind of topic, and automatically filters you to those parts. So no need to read the full report anymore, but if it works, your web browser will do the job for you and tell you which parts to work or to read. I think that is, I leave it for now, and hope I could give you a quick insight in the European territorial dimension of the circular economy and how we see it. Thank you very much.
Zdaj pa vprašanje.
Upam, so pa še drugo pogovorili. Just one question again. Thank you very much. Because outline I didn't check about the scope of the lead point of historical economy. Maybe you can say or give a tip how to, I would say, extend knowledge or awareness, attitude and belief of people on the territorial level to increase prosperity on the policy level. Is that possible? Because you have mentioned outline a lot of good methods from the worldwide. But here is a very big question, how to implement this on our level, on our, I would say, economical state and in our, I would say, economy. Thank you very much and thanks.
That's a $1 billion question. Well, we have, I'm just thinking that I can't come up with something so concrete. We haven't worked so much on how to convince people to do it. We really try to understand in the first place the territorial consequences. We had quite a lot of discussion of that we actually need to have a mind or mental shift in decision making.
This is not a very big issue nowadays. When I talk about the society, and I talk about the procedure, how to reach this model as being represented.
No, I agree. It's just kind of, in our project, we came across different stories that people told us, but we haven't researched that. And maybe also some of the speakers that come later on, they have looked much more in detailed experience and what is happening locally. So probably that can reach more. But I think about whether I come with any of the discussion points that will come back to you.
It's a long variable procedure. And it's possible to collaborate on the level of social responsibility and district communities.
I believe it's possible.
Because that's a channel to do that, to reach, I would say, different goals, which are spoken or developed in the alignment. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Kai. Še kakšno drugo vprašanje, lahko vprašate po slovensko tudi.
Maybe if I'm just loud, so we don't bother with the microphone. I wonder if you came up with any specific numerical estimates, for how much resource depletion would be slowed, because you have the best case scenario operating here.
Yes.
So I wonder, most estimates estimate, like Club of Rome and others, that between 2030 and 2040, industrial production is going to fall, because we're going to run out of resources that are easily available. So if we learn to use less resources, how much of an impact will it have? Do we have any estimates?
We very on purpose kind of didn't put any estimates in. We came across quite a lot of studies on different levels of estimates. And our feeling was, given all in particular the time frame, for us the main struggle was kind of 2030 is tomorrow. So to really make that sure, we had the feeling if we now try to put that into estimates of real figures, those will be horrible, because it's an extremely quick transition, and that usually is quite catastrophic to start with and then it recovers. And for that purpose, we stay free of calculating new estimates, but that okay, they are there. We only look at the territorial imbalances that change and really make sure understanding as an extreme case in such a short period. So the main point for me is not too much to say how things kind of change, how many GDP or whatever goes up or down, but to say there are differences and we need to cope that those differences are dealt with or used in order to make sure that we don't lose certain types of regions and everything has a backlash in the end. So therefore we stay free of bringing those estimates together. But I can send you a few links with numbers if you want.
So maybe we think sorry.
Good.
Yeah. I also try to speak loud.
Yeah.
You have just mentioned 3D printing, which seems to become a very influencing technology in the future. What we see today is just the start. So I wonder how strongly did you consider the technological developments in your prediction? Because they obviously will change the patterns radically, like from the centralized production to a very dispersed production, maybe even home production.
We discussed that, and we had much more extreme scenarios. As in the report, you find also more extreme cases. That was kind of a medium line scenario. My problem with 3D printing and this additive manufacturing, which for sure I believe will come and will have quite an impact on our way of production. We had problems of getting it into the circular economy thinking, because it's very much, you have then your container with plastics or whatever it is to put into your printer. And then all the industrial symbiosis processes where you use rest products of one production process to another. At the moment we couldn't make that work out. So 3D printing will be there, has a lot of potential, but in terms of circular economy, it also poses a question of the resource use and how that fits for our idea of not producing so much new products and reusing and producing it in symbiosis processes. So there is at the moment, you could say, a trend which could enter into a counter trend, because I don't like that device anymore, let's print a new one tonight. Attitude which wouldn't fit the change of attitude in the circular economy. So there's also a
I would agree. Let's consider recycling, not printing another, but recycling the existing. However,
yeah,
we can discuss this.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think if you go into the recycling, it very much fits into the stories that we build around that reuse, repair, recycling is very much decentralized, localized. And there's 3D printing can be an important tool to just print the kind of little thing here that is broken and not the entire device. But it's really a question of how you use that technology in the end.
Thank you. I would just maybe like to add a point or contribute a thought. More at the beginning, you had this shift from, because of recycle, reuse, repair, shift from larger scales to smaller businesses. I think that also larger businesses are shifting they're still remaining, because we have, for instance, many cases, just one is Nulon, it's a former carpet maker, now it's called Economy, it's part of Aquafil, who maybe you know this case, they're making nylon out of fish nets, but they're a huge company. Everyone's using their nylon all over the world, and also other, for instance, very much in the production of furniture. Yeah. Maybe you don't produce a new piece of furniture, but you still have more, you're not using resources. Yeah. Like you can, if you don't like these chairs, they're going to make different chairs for you from the same company instead of like throwing them away or just recycling the material. Yeah. So I think it's for big and for small enough business.
Yes. No, I fully agree, and I think what I said was not that kind of the large business disappear, but they have more of a transition challenge because they need to move a complete set of how they function, how they work. And that is more of a challenge, and they might also see a decentralization in that. But Philips will not disappear, or all the other big players, and that's for sure. But I assume we see changes in that.
What is your opinion? What will be in reality the most powerful driver? Either the digital transformation and the technologies behind to make us possible to shift toward the circular economy, or it would be the mindset of the people who will change the culture and the way that they consume. What will be the most,
Personally, I would say probably the mindset is very decisive. Because even if you have the technological shift, you can use it in different directions. So the direction how you use the technological shift depends on our mindset, what we want to use it for. So that is a tool, but if you don't have the mindset that we want to change in a circular direction, we can use the technology also in any other direction. It's only an enabler.
It's mindset.
Yeah, I would say so.
So there is not an upper limit out of evolution procedures to make a better products at the end if we have our technology. But the mentality or the mind training is much more important. But I just want to ask one question about the global crisis. What do you think global crisis, in the case of global crisis, a big impact on the circular economy or not? How to be evaluated the models after such an incident or something like that?
So global crisis, you mean what we have seen in 2008, kind of financial economic crisis?
Global crisis, the economic global crisis, or the other aspects of that?
I think a global crisis is a global crisis because it has impact on all dimensions, so it lies in the definition. No, sorry, I find that very difficult to speculate because you need to know what kind of crisis that would be to be able to think about it.
Še kakšno vprašanje?
I want to ask, I think it's a problem of mind shift in also politics, because when you are seeing what is the growing potential of economy or something like this, everyone in economy or in politics, they said it's only how much you earn, what is the, and this is not the case anymore. If you are looking like this, and when it is the bad economy in this position, then it's not okay.
Yeah.
This is mind shift, I think.
But
Because
I think
politicians have to be here. This is problem.
yeah, it needs to be.
You can't do it alone.
No. Yeah, agree. Fully agree.
Like here are building factory for low price and low value for this instead of have agricultural growth of healthy food. This is perhaps this is my opinion.
Yes.
Okay, ja. Jaz mislim, da zdaj zaključimo to razpravo. Jaz mislim, da bo v odmoru še kakšna priložnost in da Aleksandar can ask you something